Right, so this is a lovely introduction. I don't think you're getting away without an introduction. So I'm delighted to welcome Denise Hardy, who isn't just a fabulous person. She was the first person to introduce Adrian to the Lymphoedema United team in the golf day, and we've become very, very good friends since. So first of all, thank you for that. You travelled from the Lake District to be here, so thank you very much indeed for making the effort. Now, Denise, for those of you who don't know, is a legend, a lymphedema nurse consultant specialising in lymphedema for the last 33 years. Old enough. She has set up numerous clinics, including the Kendall Lymphology Centre, seeing over 4,000 patients since opening in 2005. Denise has received numerous awards over the years. The Chronic Edema Nurse of the Year Award in 2019 was especially important, in addition to her clinic receiving the rating of outstanding from the Care Quality Commission. So quite a legend. For those of you who don't know, please welcome Denise Hardy.
Oh my goodness me, that's a bit difficult to follow, and certainly difficult to follow the two speakers that you had previously. I'm certainly no professor. I'm just a nurse, literally, who came across lymphedema a long time ago. In fact, I was working it out. My daughter is coming up to 40, and that is my very first experience of lymphedema, where I was working in a hospice, literally up the road in Lichfield, St Giles Hospice. And that was one of my first post-reg jobs, working just a couple of evenings a week because my children were quite small. And I went on to duty for my very first shift and was told that I'd be looking after a lady with lymphedema. And I said, oh, lymphedema, what's that? Never heard of it, never seen it before. And they said, oh, you'll soon find out. And as Vaughan and Chris will probably, I mean, with me, going back all those years, 40 years ago, we didn't actually treat lymphedema very much, did we, in the UK? Certainly at my hospice, it was something that was never done. And hospices were different then. These days, they are very much more for symptom control. People go in and out of a hospice much more than they did then. Generally, people went in to die. And I was asked to look after this lady who was dying, unfortunately. She was a very young woman who had secondary terminal breast cancer. And as an aside, they said to me that she had lymphedema. And her lymphedema was associated, obviously, with her breast cancer treatment. And in those days, it was radical. It's certainly not like it is today. And she had what I think still is probably one of the largest lymphedemas I had ever seen. And it really, really impacted on her quality of life. And I remember saying to the sister in charge, well, gosh, right, I've never seen this. What are we going to do? And basically what we did was to set up a drip stand, and we elevated her arm, which just made her shoulder even more uncomfortable. And they gave her a water tablet, which, as we now know today, many of you with lymphedema, it doesn't make much of a difference unless you've got a comorbidity that it does help. So that poor woman that I remember so clearly died with that very awful symptom of her cancer, untreated. We didn't help her at all. And it was a number of years really before I learned that treatments were available in this country. And I just took it upon myself to learn about it. I thought, well, you know, in a hospice, you see lots of people coming through. You see lots of people with swollen arms, swollen legs because they had a cancer diagnosis. And the treatment for that cancer meant that their lymphatic system was affected in some way, which meant that they often developed lymphedema. So I saw lots of people and nothing we did helped them until I began to learn that the works of Chris and Vaughan were out there. You could do something about it. And eventually I thought, right, we really do need to address this. And I went to my board of trustees and said, I want to set up a lymphedema clinic. I'd actually won a small bursary to go around and look at the clinics that we already established. And they said, oh, okay, we'll give you 1 day a week. Have a go, see what you think, see what happens. And literally within a few months, that clinic just grown out of all proportion. And by the time I left the Lichfield in 2000, we had a purpose-built lymphedema clinic, and we were treating 1,500 patients a week. So it's a lot of people that we saw through those doors, and I was so proud of that. It's a clinic that is still running. still doing really well, I believe. But that was the start of my career in lymphedema. And since then, you know, I've seen, as Matt has alluded to, thousands of patients, particularly in my clinic in Kendal. Because when I moved there, after moving from a service that had, you know, brilliant service, lots of staff, treated lots of patients in the community, I went to the Lake District and there was nothing, and very little. And I thought, well, this is not right. There's got to be still people around here with lymphedema, and of course there was. And eventually I was given some funding to treat some of the patients that were there. And gradually, of course, that caseload built up and built up. And so I expanded my service, but it was done independently. I didn't have any funding at all. I just set it up at my own bat with, unfortunately, the monies that I'd had because my husband died, which was why I moved to the Lakes for a fresh start. So I was very lucky to have been able to do that. And I think he would have really appreciated it because he stood by what I did here in Lichfield. So my journey with lymphedema really has grown since being in the Lakes. And what I aim to do and what I'm here to talk to you about tonight really is self-management. And to me, that is so important because I already alluded to tonight is the fact that there are so few lymphedema clinics around the country that really offer lots of help and support or consistent treatments. We know what works, what helps, but it's not available to all, and it should be. And that's why I really fight the corner for lymphedema, and thank Matt, of course, for doing so too, as well as the LSN. I'm the nurse advisor for Lymphedema Support Network, so of course, you know, we'll be shouting their praises too. So going back to self-management, I feel it's really important because you have got lymphedema, probably a lot of you sitting in this room tonight, but you don't want to keep going back to a clinic forever and ever to manage it. You want to get on with your life, and that's what it's all about. Lymphedema isn't going to kill you unless you're unfortunate enough to have a really bad bout of cellulitis, which I hope you won't. But generally, you've got a swelling. You've got something that you've got to learn to live with. And my job, I mean, the job of my team is to help you come to terms with it, to learn to live with it. I want you to control the lymphedema and not the lymphedema to control you. And that's what my aim is to try and go through the elements of care that you can grasp, that you can understand, that you're comfortable with, that you will then help you to manage it and control it. So that's what we do. That's what I do in my centre, Kendal Lymphedema Centre. We see, unfortunately, I don't have the likes of Vaughan to come and assess you. I have to do that. But as you now know, I've got a lot of experience, but do know when to refer back. So if you're worried that your lymphedema, there's an underwhelming cause that might be making it worse for some reason, then I'll be sending you back to whoever might be able to address that. But on the whole, I can usually determine that it's a lymphedema that we can manage. And we will then set up the appropriate management for that. Perhaps that might be a course of bandaging. We call it intensive treatment, of course. And we do that over a period of 3 or 4 weeks on occasions. But at the end of that 4 weeks, you will then be entering in what we call the self-management phase. And during that intensive treatment, I'll have been teaching you how to do that yourself. So we really focus on patient education throughout the journey that you're with us. And that all starts with the cornerstones of management. And of course, Vaughan has already succinctly told you all about skin care and reducing the risk of cellulitis. And that to me is one of the prime important features of what we do. Is we're teaching you, we are educating you into reducing the risk of ever getting cellulitis, which can cause you to feel terribly unwell, may lead you to be hospitalized, but can also make your lymphedema worse. So we're teaching you how to manage that, how to look after your skin, what you should do, what you should use, how you can prevent getting bitten, what do you use when you go on holiday to try and prevent getting mosquito bites. Interestingly, one of the first patients that came to mind while I was listening to Vaughan was a patient who used to play here at the Belfry, who came to me in Lichfield. And he had developed scrotal lymphedema. He was in the paratroopers, he was in the SAS. And he'd done a parachute jump that had failed. And unfortunately, he landed smack on his genitals. And that ultimately made him develop lymphedema, which, as you can imagine, was an absolutely awful thing for him to have. And he'd been passed from pillar to post with absolutely no help at all. And he had come to the clinic, and we had helped him predominantly reduce those attacks of cellulitis, which he really found so troublesome, and which made, after every episode, his lymphedema worse. So once we got on top of that, we were able to really help him. But one of the things he told me about mosquitoes, and the things that really helped him and people who work in the SAS, is a product called Skin So Soft, which is an Avon product, which is nothing to do with DEET or any of those, but apparently it is a really good product to use to get it. So golfers, if you know it, use it. It's a really good product. Skin So Soft. So that's the tip for the skincare, is to reduce those. I'm not saying it will work for everybody, but at least it smells a little bit better than some of those products. So skincare is really, really important. So any cut, scratch, bite, as Vaughan has said, make sure you've got a little pack together that you can put some antiseptic on it. Watch it, observe it, and at the first sign of any infection, you start to feel unwell, then you need to seek help and get antibiotics if you haven't already got a remedy pack in house. And then, of course, those who do get recurrent infections, then I would be ensuring that you hopefully had prophylaxis to work with you. So we guide you on the different creams. We really let you choose your own cream, because it doesn't matter as long as you're not sensitive to it. As long as it's keeping that skin soft and supple, it's going to be fine, and you'll be good to go. So skincare is a priority for me. Everybody with lymphedema should know how to care for their skin and reduce the risk of infection, and if they get an infection, what they should do about it. Secondly, we're in a room today that obviously a lot of people with lymphedema who like to exercise, because you're out there doing golf, and that in itself is great exercise. Now, again, 35, 40 years ago, when we were seeing people with lymphedema, we were really cautious about exercise and telling them what they could and couldn't do. So women who were playing tennis would say, oh, be really careful with that. You know, if you're doing too much exercise, it might actually cause lymphedema to worsen. But these days we know so much more about it, and we know for sure that the lymphatic system is really lazy, and that if you're not moving, like you're not moving right now and haven't moved for a wee bit, that lymphatic system is like, okay, this is nice, I'm just not going to move very much, and the swelling will probably get a little bit worse. Much like you do when you're on a long coach journey or on a flight, you're not moving very much, and therefore many of us who don't actually have lymphedema will develop a bit of swelling when we get to our end, to our destination. So again, exercise is a really important feature for all of those with lymphedema. I want people to get moving, and you know, these days a lot of people don't like to exercise, but we encourage it in every which way we can. It doesn't have to be exercise per se, just movement, any movement at all, even if it's just waiting for the kettle to boil, just to keep getting up and down on their toes, anything they can do. If they can't walk, chair-based exercise is something that they can do. Where there's a will, there's a way, and we've designed exercise programs that we give to our patients on cards that we can individualize to give to everybody, because we want them to get moving. If they don't move, their lymphedema won't move. And of course, the exercise works really well with compression, and that's the third component of care for many of our patients with lymphedema. And that's something that we've been having a discussion about around the table tonight. And as I've intimated, when we first meet you, if you have a very large, severe, complex lymphedema, we might often bandage you first. And bandages is one way of compressing the limb. We do that with all sorts of different bandages. But it helps to really more quickly reduce the size of the swelling and to get it more conducive to the use of compression garments, which really is the mainstay of your treatment. So basically, my job is to get your garment that you are happy with. And we were saying over supper tonight that is really difficult, because what might suit Matt over there might not suit Matt over there. And it's because you only get 4 pieces of compression garment in the year. If I get it wrong on the first 2, then we've used up your choices, haven't we? So I use my experience and really work with you, the patient, to think, what is right for you? What is going to work for me? Have a look at the range of products that are available. I'm fortunate not to have to work on a formulary like many of the big hospitals do. So, you know, you guys have got, if you come to my clinic, which God don't all come tomorrow because I won't be there. But you know, we've got the choice. It's great that we can work together and choose the right one, whether that be something that's off the shelf or something that we have to measure you specifically for, that's made custom made. But all the things that I use have to be prescribable. I don't yet have a budget. I have to ensure that everything I get for you is made on prescription or is available on prescription. And again, as Chris alluded to that, when I started in lymphedema all those years ago, there was nothing available on prescription. We had to have a budget, and therefore running a lymphedema service was hugely expensive. It's a lot easier these days to be able to do that. So we've covered skincare, we've covered exercise, we've covered compression, which again is not just about garments or bandages. There are wraps. Again, we've had that discussion tonight. Some people might be wearing wraps that are sort of Velcro fastened items. We have garments that you can sleep in or not sleep in. And we also have things called intermittent pneumatic compression pumps, which deliver effectively a electronic massage. So it sort of helps in that way, but it is compression. And it's useful for many patients, particularly if they're dependent, not able to move very much, not able to get onto the golf course like you guys have today. So everything has a place in the lymphedema world, and it's my job as a therapist to work out what is right for you. What else in compression? We've got negative compression, which sounds a bit doolally. It's not something that is pressing onto the limb. It's pressed onto the limb, but it's actually lifting it. And again, many of you might be aware of this as kinesiotaping, which is often used in sporting injuries. We use that a lot in lymphedema now, and particularly useful for those who've got head and neck swelling, breast edema, genital swelling, for example. We also did different types of it now. I mean, you might know it as this colourful or beige stuff that you see slapped over the likes of David Beckham, who I'd love to come to my clinic, but sadly he's never been available. These days we've got kinesiotape that's got little handles on it. So this is brilliant for when we're trying to improve scar tissue. So I might lay this onto a scar and we can literally lift these flaps, which in turn lifts the skin, if you can appreciate that on my skin, lifts the skin, and I can mobilize the skin. And that really helps to get some movement through the scar tissue. So we get lots of improvement that way. So although it's classed, I class it as negative compression, it's being put onto the skin, but it's actually helping to lift it and to mobilize some of the lymphatics. So compression used in lots of different ways. And of course, it's not just stockings or leg garments or garments for the arm. We also need to consider garments for head and neck. We need to consider them for breast, and we need to consider them for those with genital swelling. And those are much more difficult because often they're not available on prescription. So that becomes a little more tricky for me to manage. But these days, with the likes of some of our companies around, we've been able to get those on prescription, but not for everything. Bras at the moment are still very dicey. It's really difficult to find bras for people who've got breast edema. Treatment for breast cancer is much more conservative these days. We don't see the radical mastectomies and the large arm swelling that I used to see. These days, we see much more breast edema, which can be just as painful, just as troublesome as those who have a limb swelling. And we've gone on to develop a bra guide now for those ladies who really struggle with swelling, perhaps in one breast becomes bigger than the other side, even though they've had surgery, which often confuses them and thinks, well, how has that happened? But by providing them with guidelines about how to get measured correctly for a bra and what will work for their lymphedema and their swollen breast is really helpful and can guide them really well when they go shopping. The other aspect of care that some of you will know about is lymph drainage, lymphatic drainage. Manual lymphatic drainage is what we do to our patients to physically move the fluid from one area to another. It's changed over the years. It's certainly not widely available these days, and that's why, again, we teach it to our patients. It's something that you can do yourself, something that will really help to shift that fluid and get things moving. With working with the LSN, I'm really pleased to say that we've got some really great guidelines on YouTube now that you can access on behalf of the LSN, really helpful, that guide you through doing those sequences that we've helped to put together for you. So it's worth looking at, worth exploring some of the things that is out there. But it is something that you really do need to be shown. It's easy to look at something, but as I saw a patient this morning who had been doing it herself, she'd seen something on the internet and was showing me what she was doing, but it was totally incorrect. You can't actually feel it, can you, from seeing something on the TV? So it's always great if you can to get that firsthand from a therapist to show you how to do it. So what else are we going to do, and what else are we going to teach you to do in our lymphedema clinic? We've already mentioned that it has a bearing on your mental, on your psyche. Having lymphedema is just something else you've got to put up with in your life. And again, we try and aim for you to come to terms with having that. The LSN, of course, is really, really helpful for that. We have support groups. We have one locally for our patients. And we try and break down, so for those who've got head and neck lymphedema, we try and encourage them to go and see their local head and neck cancer support groups. We have breast cancer support groups. We have lymphedema support groups around locally that we've set up. It's always nice to be able to meet somebody else who's got the same condition that you can talk to and chat to about that, talk to your peers. And again, we were talking this evening about the gentlemen who have lymphedema. It's not as common on my caseload as women. We have many more women than men. And getting you all together and being able to feel comfortable to chat about it, I think, is absolutely amazing. And again, it's thanks to Matt, of course, that all of that has come to being for you. Support then is extremely important. And I think the other thing that I want to really raise is that you try and empower other people to teach them about what lymphedema is, your GPs particularly. We have again developed modules through the British Medical Journal. Thank you. We have put together modules that they can actually learn about lymphedema. You guys can do them too. But if you can share that knowledge, that information, that then the GPs might actually begin to learn a little bit more about it. So I think, I did have a box of stuff that I was going to show you, but I think we've all had enough of all of it. And certainly my tummy is really full and I probably wouldn't be able to bend down enough to get it. I'm going to flag up the book, if I may, our lymphedema from the LSN, because we worked with that over COVID. It's really just talks about the things I've been discussing with you just now. But as I said at the very beginning, what I want you and hopefully everybody else you meet that has lymphedema is that, you can live well with it. You just need good information and advice and support. So please do, really try getting in control of the lymphedema rather than the lymphedema controlling you. It really will help you. So thank you so much for listening. Thank you for asking me. And I hope I lived up a little bit to that. Thank you.
Yes, it absolutely.